work today for me was pretty standard. I mean, like, because it was Wednesday and my coworker's off, I opened. So, like, I started at 7 and, like, for the most part, it was pretty good. I mean, we made sales. I had some pretty good sales today. But yeah, something weird happened around lunchtime though. Like I was just minding my own business and like chowing down on some pad thai that I brought from home, microwavable pad thai that one of those like ramen kind of dishes that you get at Aldi's, and yeah, so yeah, I was just enjoying that, reading up on some hockey. Really excited that hockey's about to come back before it's like less than 1 week, baby. But yeah, as I'm reading, The Athletic this morning, reading about an article about like how the Penguins need to keep their top prospect D like on the main roster this year. Some guy randomly comes into the store and he just asks me, "Hey," well, he doesn't really ask. He just tells me, "Show me the way to the next whiskey bar."
I feel like there should be more details to this, but I won't ask why.
And welcome back, everybody, to the best music podcast on all sides of planet Earth. And the way that we measure that distinction is we go from Ukraine, we travel to Uganda, but we take the long way around. Ladies and gentlemen, this podcast is called Hey, Listen to This. And it is hosted by two dashingly good-looking men who share the same middle name. I am the one. I am the only. I am the one who surprisingly found out that due to his kick-up-full team this year in fantasy hockey, he's going to be a Bruins fan this year. Ryan James Kearns.
And I'm the one, the only, the what the hell did you just say? We may have to talk about that later. Matthew James Durzik. And for those of you who don't know what we do here on Hey, Listen to This, it's right there in the title, Hey, Listen to This, where me and Ryan every week, we pick an album to listen to, and then we come here face to face, voice to voice, to dissect it, what we liked, what we don't like, and sometimes that may not all happen in the same podcast. Sometimes we might find stuff we like without finding anything we don't like, or we may find stuff that we don't like without finding anything we like. Anyways, Ryan, what did we do last week?
So that was a very clever way to segue to last week's recap. So we dissected Kush and Orange Juice by Whisky. It was his 2010 mixtape, and yeah, it was an experience for me. You were definitely a lot higher on the album than I was, but yeah, usually at this point in the episode, I'm like, yeah, I'm pretty happy walking away from the review. But just, ladies and gentlemen, if you're curious to hear like my full thoughts, reasonings, reactions, and just, you know what to do. Just go back one episode to that episode that's entitled Kush and Orange Juice by Wiz Khalifa mixtape review, and dive in, man. Take a 2-hour detour from this episode to experience that episode, then come back to this episode.
Yeah, and granted, despite our disagreement on it, I would say that was a fun episode to do, just to try something new, try something we haven't talked about in a little bit, which was some modern-ish hip-hop, because, I mean, it's hard to say something's modern when it was 15 years ago. But we're definitely not doing anything modern this week. We're going back a ways a little bit, more so than 2010. Ryan, what have you chosen for this week's pod?
So, we're going to travel to the year of our Lord, 1967, and talk about one of the two albums that the Doors released in that year, because I just realized that they released their follow-up to this album that we're talking about today later on that year. But we're not talking about the follow-up. We're talking about the debut album from the group, The Doors. And it's a self-titled debut, for lack of a better segue there. So, for those of you who are out there and are like, whoa, 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 what is a door? I mean, you might have another problem, and I can't even make an Amish joke here because like doors require no electricity. Well, I mean, I suppose automatic sliding doors do, but I digress. I'm going down a rabbit hole. So, in terms of musical projects, so the band The Doors, they came out of the L.A. They were born and bred in the Los Angeles scene, and like you got to think about what was going on in the late '60s at this time. You got like the flower power movement, the hippie movement, and the Doors. They were something that was a bit different. Like they were a lot darker, more poetic, and a little bit more dangerous. I mean, there's a lot of shenanigans that the Doors came up with. Well, not came up with, but that they partook in their careers. We'll talk about like one incident within the context of this review here, but when we get to Light My Fire, we will. So yeah, at the core, the Doors are basically a blend of four like talented and distinct personalities. So like the main figurehead of the Doors, most people might know this, is Jim Morrison. AKA the Lizard King. So he was a magnetic, charismatic frontman. He was UCLA film student and self-published poet who quickly transformed into just the rock icon that became like the Lizard King. And then counteracting him is Ray Manzarek on keyboards. A little bit more sophisticated, classically rock trained musician, and he was more classically trained, and he was a good counteracting, grounding force for Jim Morrison. And then over on guitar, we got Bobby Krieger, soft spoken guitarist. Again, trained more in the classical sense and blues, but he wrote some pretty good stuff like that we're going to be discussing here today. And then completing the band here is John Densmore on drums, jazz trained drummer, complex rhythms that gave the band a different kind of dynamic and kind of really separated the group. So overall, a lot of influences with blues and classically trained musicians, but on top of all this, you get Jim Morrison, who was more into being a poet and just really diving into philosophy himself. And he was really, for those of you who are familiar with Friedrich Nietzsche, he was heavily influenced by Nietzsche. So just to give you a little bit of laying the foundation for who the Doors were. So like I mentioned, the band formed in LA and they officially formed in the summer of 1965 when Jim and Ray, who knew each other from film school, had a chance encounter on Venice Beach. Morrison confided that he'd been writing songs, and when he sang the opening lines to Moonlight Drive, Ray Manzarek was instantly captivated. He's just like, you know what? We got to form a band. We got whatever two best friends do. They're like, hey man, let's just do this, man. You have some fire, and I got the keys here. Let's do this, man. So they at the time they recruited Manzarek's brothers for a little bit, but the core four were solidified when John Densmore joined, who knew Ray Manzarek from a meditation class. And then John brought his friend Bobby Krieger. So the four officially formed at that point. The way that they got their name was from a book called The Doors of Perception. I mean, the quote that people often cite from there relating to the Doors are, the quote goes, "If the doors of perception were cleansed, everything would appear to man as it is, infinite." So yeah, that's basically the formation. And from there, they really just go into the gig circuit, grinding, gigs at the on the Sunset Strip and playing at legendary clubs like the London Fog and the Whisky a Go Go. And it was thanks to these gigs here that they really developed their songcraft. They developed their songs, stretching out, improvising, and challenging the audience throughout their performances. And so, yeah, I mean, ultimately, that basically kind of leads us up to the debut record today, that we're going to be talking about here today. So what led to them getting their big break was there was just enough groundswell behind them that Electrica Records eventually signed them. So, and ultimately the Doors weren't about singing about peace and love. They were exploring the dark side of the mind, the edge of performances, and the chaos of existence. So, yeah, I mean, that's a kind of a brief blitz through of the Doors themselves. Like some groups that we've talked about in the past, I feel like I don't need to go 20 minutes into a dissection about how each band member met each other like I did with the London Suede, because the Doors are a little bit more popular. No offense to the London Suede, but facts are facts. But yeah, so that's a brief rundown of the Doors themselves. Now, before I get into my relationship with the group, I'm gonna pass the mic over to you, Matt. What is your relationship with the Doors?
So my relationship with listening to the Doors and experiencing their music pretty much starts where a lot of people do, which is growing up. I had my classic rock phase, as we've talked about several times on this show, where I would listen to, I would shift away from pop and start heading into more hard-nosed classic rock and roll, and the Doors were part of that. Obviously getting exposed to songs like Roadhouse Blues, Light My Fire, Hello, I Love You, name some of the more popular tunes. And as we'll discuss with Light My Fire, that was one of those first songs where I heard the single version first on oldies radio, and then when I heard classic rock radio, I was like, wait, this song's longer? What? And so that created a bit of a sticking point. And then during high school, particularly during sophomore year, I started getting more into the Doors after listening to the first album that we're going to be talking about, and also managing to get a copy of, it was my dad's copy of John Densmore's autobiography entitled Riders on the Storm, in which he chronicles so much that a lot of people do or may not know about the Doors, and particularly the antics of one Jim Morrison. And just reading that and listening to the album and thinking, man, this is some really good stuff, kind of inspired me in a sense to start writing my own stuff as far as lyrics are involved, if I may confide with the audience like Jim confided to Ray. And pretty much ever since, I've always appreciated the Doors for being who they are. Haven't really dug into their other catalog as much. I've listened to some tracks off of Morrison Hotel, LA Woman, and even the Soft Parade, but I cannot recall the last time, aside from this album, I've listened to a Doors album front to back. So it's an interesting situation, but overall I am a fan of this band. And that being said, Ryan, I throw it right back to you. What's your experience with the Doors?
So, unless I am mistaken, for the first time in the history of our show here, we're going to be covering a group that I once considered to be my favorite band at one point in my 34 years of living. So, yeah, there you go. So that should tell you enough about my relationship with the Doors. But I'm gonna flesh it out a little bit, a little bit more, just for the context of the audience there and you yourself. So, similar to you, I went through my classic rock phase when I was in high school, and I don't know what gravitated me towards listening to the Doors, but I listened to the debut album that we're talking about today at one point, and I was kind of instantly hooked with what the band had to offer. So I read a book about Jim Morrison's life. I can't remember if it was an autobiography or just a biography uh, by itself, but like I really enjoyed reading about Jim Morrison's life and like all the kind of crazy stuff that like surrounded his existence. So after that, dove into their catalog head to toe. I mean, I never really dove into like the stuff, post LA Woman in terms of like after Jim Morrison's death, and also I never really dove into Jim Morrison's solo career because like I don't know the poetry aspect of it never really really appealed to me. So, but yeah, I was a huge fan of this group. Personally, the first couple albums are where it's at. Like, you get the debut album, you get Strange Days and Waiting for the Sun. And then, like, the other albums that you mentioned, like Soft Parade, Morrison Hotel, and LA Woman, like, they're fine. They're good in their own right, but they don't hold a candle to that original, fire that the group was bringing with these first three records here. But yeah, I'm admittedly a huge it has been a while myself in terms of like really listening to a Doors record, but they will always hold a special place in my heart.
Yeah, no, I'm right there with you, and it's funny because this is a band that their entire aura isn't necessarily like you say, peace and love, and that's kind of what our affections are for this band, which is kind of ironic. But yeah, I say if you're ready, we kick things off with the first of 11 on the Doors' debut album from 1967, and that is the first single, entitled "Break On Through to the Other Side." Right, if you're ready.
I am absolutely ready to break on through to the other side with this song here. So, sorry, that pun was right there. So, yeah, with Break On Through to the Other Side, if I had to show somebody, like, what really, represents the Doors sound to a T, and what they were bringing to the table from like a songcraft perspective, a performance perspective, just a complete package. This would be like one of the first songs that I would show them. Like you
did. Sorry to interrupt. This is literally how he opened a mix for me. So if you want to include that, you don't have to include me on the interruption. You can just include that.
But yeah, so how this track here really encapsulates the Doors sound. You get the chaotic aspect of almost like a loud soft dynamic between like the verses and the chorus, but within that loud soft dynamic you get excellent performances from the instrumentation. Right away, coming right out of the gate, you get the first thing you hear is John Densmore on the drums doing like that little nice little hi-hat beat, and then after that you get Ray Manzarek coming in with his lick, and Bobby Krieger's doing his own thing, and they're each doing a great job just laying down a groove. And then of course you get Mr. Lizard King coming in himself, delivering quite a passion vocal performance, and his lyrics, while a younger Ryan Jamal Kearns might say that his lyrics were super deep, man, and super complex, they're not really all that complex. I mean, yeah, there's some metaphorical symbolism behind a lot of it. In verse 3, you get I found an island in your arms, a country in your eyes, arms that chain us, eyes that lie. And that's basically alluding to how love is gonna deceive us all, love is gonna break us all. So, but one thing I did like about Morrison's performance, other than just his overall loud soft dynamic, is just how passionate he gets in the chorus, it's such a simple chorus. It literally is just break on through to the other side, like the title of the song. But you could tell like he's really just embodying that energy, like that Little Richard energy that we discussed, like like a bunch of episodes back, like just really just diving in and digging in. So I really did appreciate that. Then, like outside of those moments, like the instrumental break is pretty good. I do like what's going on there. But yeah, just overall though, this song here is such a fun time, and it doesn't really overstay its welcome. I like how it ends, and like you could really like you get like a little bit of like a bridge section, and it just basically rides the chorus like one more time, and then it gets the crap out of there. So it doesn't overstay its welcome. It's a great song, and the only other thing I got to say about such a great song is the fact that Break On Through to the Other Side did land in my top 3 here. It is my second favorite song off the whole record. And for full disclosure, before I kick it over to you, Matt, I only have a top 3 with this review here. I don't have a bottom anything. So kind of an inverse of last week.
I was about to say, favorite songs on the Ryan Kern side have returned. Glad to have you back. So my thoughts on Break On Through to the Other Side very much mirror yours. The beat that John Densmore lays down to start the track, that bossa nova beat, and to be fair, a lot of what I'm saying may resemble things I learned from the documentary on this album that Classic Albums did roughly around the year 2000, 2001. So yeah, I would highly, 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 highly recommend checking that out if you're a fan of this album. But they showed Densmore playing the traditional bossa nova beat, which was with a brush and a stick, and he changed that to the brush to another stick and used that on the ride cymbal before getting into the main groove of the song on the chorus. And he just has a great performance here, very intense. Ray Manzarek does great on this track, like you said. The organ riff is iconic, along with the instrumental breakdown and the solo that happens in the middle. That was nice. Robbie Krieger, I think, is a little underrated here. He provides just that right amount of counter with Manzarek particularly, and especially on that last little bridge part before the final chorus and the final verse, you get those staggering like dissonant chords that I thought that really contributed to the whole entire intensity of the song. And as far as Morrison is concerned, I think you nailed it. I would go back 2 weeks ago to what we talked about with Tom Verlaine and Television, is that even if these poetic lyrics don't make sense to us, the listener, like whatever Morrison sings about, we chased our pleasures here, touched our treasures there, but can you still recall the time we cried? Like, even if we have no idea what the hell he's talking about, he sure does, and he is going to let us know that he does, because his performance commands his work. It is a great, great performance overall. And I do agree with you that, not only does it get out of the way very quickly, but it also just keeps getting more and more intense. Like, it does have a nice ebb and flow before those last couple of choruses, but once it gets that final chorus and that final verse, it just barrels, it breaks on through. In a sense, it does. The only other thing I have to mention about this song is that it also has an historical piece in pop culture for being one of the first music videos ever recorded for this song. Like, music videos weren't really a thing in the 60s yet, because video itself was still in its relative infancy. Not that it wasn't completely infant, but the idea of turning a song into a music video and enjoying it through the video was still a relatively new concept. But they did it with this song, and it's a pretty decent, if simplistic video, with the band doing its performances. And it sort of, it does create the same intensity that the song itself does. So it has a nice place in music history too. And the only other thing I'm going to add is that, much like you, Ryan, I also have this in my top 3, and it's at number 2 as well. I have it right in the same spot as you. And also, I also have a top 3 and a bottom zilch for this review.
I'm curious to see what your first and third are, because, like, if we are one and the same, which I don't think we are. I think I know what one of your favorite songs is going to be, and I know it's not in my top 3, obviously. But, I mean, I just have a gut feeling. But just a couple other things I got to mention about Break On Through to the Other Side before we kick it on over to Sleep All Night in That Soul Kitchen that Jim Morrison loves so much, is the fact that you mentioned, like, oh, hey, yeah, like, we might not know what Jim is talking about with Break On Through to the Other Side and what the song is about. I mean, it's about drugs. I mean, let's be real. Like, we chased our pleasures here, dug our treasures there. So, yeah, it's breaking on through the other side through, like, psychedelics and everything like that. And, like, the one line that you did allude to, though, was, like you mentioned, but can you still recall the time we cried? I will say maybe that's not so much about drugs, maybe just trying to ground the listener in a sense of, like, hey, remember the last time we had, like, human emotion instead of just trying to chase pure happiness? But, I mean, that's just my dive into the thing. But yeah, Break Up Through the Other Side. Yes, it's very much about drugs, but, this song slaps so hard, man. I absolutely love it so much.
I do too. It is a great, great song. And with that, I am going to go ahead and take the reins with Soul Kitchen, which is the second track off this album. And here we get a bit more of a, I wouldn't say traditional 60s pop track, because there's a lot of this track that's not very conventional or traditional, but it does have a standard, more 4/4 type feel to it, unlike Break On Through. And what's interesting about this song is that at the start, you have 2 bass parts and 2 drum parts, because harkening back to that Classic Albums documentary I was talking about, engineer Bruce Botnick, who worked on this record, he talked about how John Densmore actually overdubbed his drum part on this song, where one side was him keeping beat and not doing anything, where the other one was more of a looser riff, throw in fills type of track. And then you get double bass parts, one from bass player Larry Knechtel, who plays on a few tracks on this album simply to bottom out the track as far as creating that more official sound per se. He doesn't play on all of them, but he does play on a few of them, and this is one of them. And he doubles the bass part being played by Ray Manzarek on his organ, because for live performances and for a lot of the Doors songs in themselves, Ray doubled as the bass player. Like, he had the little organ bass on his top keyboard, and it made those weird sort of like buzzing keyboard bass noises that would go on to be much more prominent in pop music throughout the 70s and even to the 2020s. And it does sound really good. Like, it sounds good. But the key star of this particular track is Robbie Krieger, because his guitar starts off with this nice little solo line, and then it gets into this James Brown-esque guitar part where he's definitely doing the horn section with a and it is the key figure to this song. Morrison sings good on here, not quite as revolutionary as Break On Through to the Other Side, but that's not really a disrespect. I mean, he sings quite well on this track, particularly on the chorus, which does pop off nicely compared to the more laid-back verses where Morrison talks about sleeping in the soul kitchen and, it's time to close, but I really want to stay here all night. And this song could be taken a couple ways lyrically. You may delve more into that. I mean, it may very literally be about a soul kitchen where you're at an all-night diner and you just want to chill and hang out and just bliss out for a while without actually having to get up and walk home. Or it could very well be about sex. I mean, it's Jim Morrison. There's a more than 0% chance that any time he opens his mouth, that is the subject. But all of that to say, I like Soul Kitchen a lot. It is a nice way to both change things up and continue on the momentum of this album, but it is not in my top 3.
That's fair enough. So, and I'll like just come right out of the gate and say like myself, like Soul Kitchen, it's not in my top 3 either. But like that's nothing to discredit with what it's bringing to the table. I'm gonna start by kind of diving into the meaning of the song, and it's literally just about Jim Morrison's love for a soul food, serving diner, specifically Olivia's on Venice Beach. So yeah, it's an ode to the song is essentially an ode to Morrison's drunken nights and early mornings there. That's a fun thing, and just like you did a very good job, dissecting the track. I mean, the Robbie Krieger, guitar section that you were talking about, specifically, like you did allude that it's a James Brown, horn section kind of thing. It's an homage to, specifically James Brown's "Papa's Got a Brand New Bag." So, for those of you who want to, take a musical detour, maybe save that song to a playlist later on and be like, oh, hey, that sounds familiar. But, the only other things I gotta mention about the track themselves, the instrumentation here does do a lot of the heavy lifting. The right out of the gate, that lick that you get from the organ kicks off everything in a very cool fashion. And the band just grooves so hard here. The instrumentation is really solid here, and the only other thing I really want to dive into specifically is Morrison's vocals, and specifically the one lyric that kind of just really got me hooked, and that lyric is "Learn to Forget," and I love how it's kind of he lingers on it, and it if I'm not mistaken, learn to when that section comes up, right after that you get right back into the chorus. So it's just whipping back into the excitement and everything about the track. But the phrase "learn to forget," it possibly has to do with the fact that Morrison had a rocky relationship with his father. And so, he grew up a military brat, for those of you who aren't aware. And so he had major issues with his dad, who never accepted or even appreciated Morrison's artistic side. So he said, well, hey, I'm going to, do my own thing. And the whole phrase "learn to forget," it's possibly an allusion to the fact that Morrison had to learn to forget about his past in order to be truly free. So, and break on through to the other side if you want to be that cheeky. But yeah, it's I just thought that was a very interesting phrase. But yeah, overall though, Soul Kitchen is a good time for me, and I would put it in the good song bucket, to bring back a trope that we have here at Hey Listen to This. It's a very good song, but I very much enjoy it. It's a good time.
It is a very good song. I'd put it in the good song bucket as well. In fact, I'd probably put it in the great song bucket, just for altruistic sake. Soul Kitchen is a solid, great song. But I am ready if you are to pivot on over to the next track, which is The Crystal Ship, if you're ready.
Oh, absolutely, my friend. So The Crystal Ship, we get a bit of a, I don't want to say a whiplash, but a change of styles here, because Break On Through to the Other Side was this rocking kind of song, and then Soul Kitchen, you turn down the temperature a little bit, but the intensity and the fire is still there at some points. But here, The Crystal Ship, it's almost like a ballad, for lack of a better descriptor, and I'm a huge fan of the song. The way that the whole song just begins with Jim coming in on that offbeat, and how he just sounds so good. It's just an absolute great way to open up the track, and just as you're getting Jim, singing this, what almost seems to be a love song at first, And you could possibly also, like, make an allusion to, like, drugs and everything like that. And to be fair, Jim Morrison, it's fair. But, yeah, just zooming outside of Morrison his performance, like, what I really did like about the song on the instrumentation front is you get actual keys on the song. Like, nothing against Ray Manzarek and his organ. Like, it's great. It's legendary, iconic for a reason. But here, the keys work so well, and his performance on this track with the keys is he just sounds so nice. Like, I really do appreciate what's going on there. And, like, the next thing I want to mention is the imagery towards the end of the track when Jim is singing about, like, the crystal ship is being built and how everything is how everything ends, like, after that is just so good with, like, you get the sense of finality, like, the crystal ship is being built and it's being filled with all this stuff, and how it ends with, like, I know we'll drop you a line, like, everything kind of comes crashing. I don't want to say crashing now, but, like, almost like a show tunes kind of ass, like, everything just kind of winds down very, like, melodically. So yeah, I like this song quite a bit. And a little bit of the background about this track here. So this song here was composed as a love song for Jim Morrison's first serious girlfriend shortly after the relationship ended. And it's funny, though. Like, I started the discussion here by saying that Crystal Ship kind of can come across as a love song, but for me, like, the whole last verse is great, but it almost seems like an FU to his ex. Like, you take a look at the last verse being, the crystal ship is being filled, 1,000 girls, 1,000 thrills, a million ways to spend your time. When we get back, I'll drop a line. And basically, I took that as Jim being like, you know what, hey, our relationship is over, but this crystal ship, like, I'm about to take off on, like, it has, like, a billion things to do. It has 1,000 girls. Like, there's so many things that occupy my time. You know what? When we get back, I'll help you get on this ship here. So, like, I thought that was interesting. But yeah, like, overall, though, the only critique that I have about Crystal Ship is I feel like it needed to be flushed out just a little bit more, in that it just seems like it ends just prematurely. But nonetheless, though, this song is really, really good. And the only thing I gotta add is it landed in my top 3. The Crystal Ship is my third favorite song off the whole album.
Much respect, much respect. My thoughts on the Crystal Ship. First of all, Jim's vocal performance on here is elegant. And it is a bit of a whiplash from the intense organ-driven groove of Soul Kitchen and Break On Through. And what's funny is, going back to classic albums, Bruce Botnick mentioned that Jim was super hyped to record in their studio because they had a microphone called a Telefunken U47, which was the same vocal mic that Frank Sinatra used on all of his recordings, or the majority of them. So Jim, being a lifelong fan of Frank Sinatra, was like, oh, okay, this is the good stuff here. So he knew he had a chance to bring out his inner Sinatra on this ballad, and he succeeds very, very well. And it is a vocal that ebbs and flows without getting too screamy or shouty, and it proves that Morrison doesn't necessarily need to do that on every song. So it is a wonderful performance by him. And I know you mentioned that it's nice to hear the keyboards on the song acoustically instead of the electric organ. What's interesting is that you do hear both on this track. Like, the piano keys are the driving force, particularly on the solo, which is just wonderful. But the fact that it bounces out and comes back with the organ riff behind it, I thought was really, really cool, because not often where you hear both piano and organ working so well in tandem like that on the same song. And no disrespect to John Densmore or Robbie Krieger, they do very nice on this song too. You get little lilts of guitar, and Densmore keeps tempo nicely. But this song does belong to Jim and Ray, and it's a strong, strong song. It's interesting that you paint the lyrics that way at the end there as basically a, hey, you know, our relationship's over. I'm going out to this ship of opportunity where I'm going to be with all these girls. But, you know, when I'm done with them, I'll give you a line. I never thought of it that way, but I think you're probably right. And especially because Jim would eventually do exactly that in his personal life and his professional life. But yeah, that's not the takeaway from the song. It is a wonderful, wonderful song. However, we are not eye to eye. This did not land in my top 3. It goes into the good song bucket.
Fair enough, man. Fair enough. I mean, I won't cry so much. No, just kidding. But no, realistically though, like I think I just have a I don't want to say a personal relationship with the Crystal Ship here, but I just have such an affinity for it. Like it was always one of my favorite tracks off of the like album, man. Like honestly, like if I had to name another song off of, well, just another song in general that, hey, okay, I tried Break On Through to the Other Side, and I want to, show me something else of the Doors and what they can do. I'm like, here, enjoy the Crystal Ship. That would be another track that I would definitely introduce a new Doors fan to. But are you ready to talk about not the Crystal Ship, but are you ready to talk about the 20th Century Fox, the next track here?
Yes, the next track, which is 20th Century Fox. And here we have an instance of the Doors going back to somewhat what they did on Soul Kitchen, although a little less on the funk side. To me, this sounds like the Doors trying to intentionally make a pop song. Like up until this point, they're just trying whatever make them sound like the Doors. Here, it's like they're trying to take the Doors and put them into a more pop-friendly context, because this song sounds like a very straightforward pop song. I'd argue that it's because it is a straightforward pop song. But it's a good song, too. First of all, you get that nice little organ riff to start things off by Ray Manzarek, and then Robbie comes in with his guitar, and then it gets into the verses, which are probably some of the more simplistic on the entire record. With, well, she's fashionably lean and she's fashionably late. And I do like how Morrison's vocals sort of tail off at the end of certain lines, either because they're double-tracked or because he thought it was a good effect, which I would say it is, because it sort of has this tinge of a live feel almost, even though some consider it undisciplined. I would say it's more of an artistic choice in this case, especially when you get to the chorus where things really start sharpening up. Because when they hit that chorus of, 'cause she's a 20th Century Fox, like you can hear they are focused and locked in on this performance, even though, again, lyrically, it's probably one of, if not the shallowest song on the whole record. But that's not to knock it for what it is. It's a solid, solid track, and it's really a fun listen to. Robbie's solo in the middle is very nice. But aside from that, there's really not a whole lot to say about the song, otherwise that it does sort of invoke the feeling of being on the Sunset Strip, late at night, and if you were someone like Jim Morrison or someone who wanted to be Jim Morrison, you're out in LA, you're looking around, and you see this girl who has a sort of strut in her step, and you're just like, oh, that's a modern girl. I like modern girls. And that's pretty much what this song's about. There's really not a whole lot else to it. The lyrics do get kind of random when Jim's talking about all these things that she does not have on the post-chorus, but that's just a very minor nitpick. This song goes right in a good song bucket too for me. Not in my top 3, but it's just another very, very nice song from the Doors.
So I'm gonna start by diving into the lyrics here a little bit more because the way I took this song here, "20th Century Fox," like for those of you who are out there, have you ever heard of 20th Century Fox movie studios? Uh, and like this song here, I took as a pun on that studio, and how this woman in this song, like while she's a modern day woman, she's glamorous yet artificial. So like the post chorus, like the little things that you mentioned where Jim is singing, "No tears, no fears, no ruined years, no clocks." Yeah, it's basically saying, hey, like she's really cool, but she's artificial, completely fake. And like other than that, there's no real deep meaning with the song here, other than it's Jim and the crew having fun with like just making fun of fake people. Outside of that, like you did a very good job of describing what the song brings to the table on the instrumental front, and even on like the chorus front too. Like I'm right there with you. The chorus is just so good. Like it's I almost want to say Ryan Kearns coded with like the definitive stops, like 20th Century Fox, like that just lands so well on my ears. And outside of that, like the only other thing I gotta say about the instrumentals, like they're good. I like what they bring to the table. It's almost like a smooth jazz music kind of background. Like it's just a very kind of like kind of like a groovy kind of song. Like nothing to nothing to diminish the efforts of the backing band here. The song is pretty much what it is. I mean, you did a solid job describing what's going on there. Yeah, the only thing I gotta say, like this song goes in the good song bucket for me. Not a top track though. And nothing to take away from it though.
Yeah, no, it again. If it weren't for the performances and the fact that the Doors sound like they do, you could probably write this off as an album track. But most of the album tracks on this album that aren't singles, that aren't standout songs that the whole world knows, are still good enough to be in the good song bucket. And I'll explain why a little later on when we talk about their overall feelings about this album. But I'm ready to throw it back to you for the next track, which is the first cover of two on this record, which is Alabama's song, parentheses, Whiskey Bar, unparentheses.
Oh my god. So this song here, like so the cover itself, though, that you alluded to with the Alabama song, it's a cover of a German poem written in 1927, and Kurt Weill adapted it in 1929 for an opera contribution. And for those of you who want a little bit more context before I dive into the lyrics, because the lyrics are fun. So this poem itself, it was in the poem itself, and within the collection that it is founded in. Like it's essentially mocking Martin Luther and Christianity at the time of the church at the time. It's almost like supposed to be like a satirical take on it. And Matt, like I'm just gonna say it. Thank goodness that I discovered that, because like for those of you who have never heard Alabama song, like a lot of the song is basically, well, show me the way to the next little girl, don't ask why. And I'm like, oh, okay, but I have to ask why. But within the context of the cover itself, this is making fun of the church, like the Catholic Church at the time, making fun of the Christian Church at the time in like the early like 1900s. So yeah, I'm gonna cut the band a little bit of slack on that, because they are it's poking fun at the church. At the sake of being redundant and vamping on that fact for a while, outside of the lyrics and everything like that, just the song itself, it's fun. Like it has this little shanty beat going on with it, with like the like a tuba and like the like it's just so much fun. I like the downbeat, just the overall flow. It's pretty cool, and it almost has this like carnival kind of kind of feel to it at certain points. That adds a very interesting texture to it. And the only other thing I gotta mention about the track itself is the track kind of stops for a second before the chorus, but then it picks itself right back up. Like, I like the stop, the stop and start feature there. That's very much Ryan Kearns coded. Yeah, the only thing I gotta mention about Alabama song Whiskey Bar is I do like Jim's performance. It's very solid. It's very much reminiscent of a man just like, going through the street at night, being all drunken and everything like that. But Alabama song Whiskey Bar did not land in my top three. But I would put it maybe at maybe a four or five on the record, depending on like my feelings about the next song coming up here.
So my thoughts about Alabama song Whiskey Bar. First of all, I'm glad you described what the context of it was based on what Brecht and Weil initially intended, or the poet themselves intended, because I would not have realized that was the case with this song. But even when you remove that context, like, yeah, the chance of, oh, don't ask why, those probably do need some context, but the rest of the song really doesn't. Because even if you take away the context, it just sounds like a bunch of dudes, like you say, stumbling through the streets, looking for a place to get a drink, and looking for, some action. Guys being bros, being dudes, being men. Not that that's a compliment, but again, that's for another debate for another day. But yeah, like the organ that Ray does here is fantastic. It is the driving force with the oompa thing that he's doing on the word, that bump, 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 bump. Like, that's a driving force. Then you get these weird like handbell effects that are in the verses, that like that is probably one of the only times you ever hear that in a Doors song, let alone a song like this. So that was a nice, interesting touch. And then you get the vocal performance of Jim, which is solid. And then you get the all-male chorus at the end, singing like they're, arm in arm, drink and drink, just singing, the final parts of the second half of the song. We're doing a da 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 da. Like, you can imagine them in the bar, beer in hand, and just like, hey, how you doing tonight? So yeah, this song is fun. It does have some relatively aggressively male undertones, which, again, it's the 60s, and also it's the Doors, and it's Jim Morrison, so it was of the time, and also what did you expect? For me, it is another song in the good song bucket. It did not land in my top three, but it's fun. I'm right there with you on that.
I would place Alabama song in what I would consider to be the great song bucket. Like, I'm not gonna put it in the same bucket as like Soul Kitchen and like a couple of the tracks that we talked about earlier. But yeah, I'm glad, again, not to sound redundant, but I'm glad that I discovered that this was a parody off of the collection of sermons by Martin Luther, because otherwise I would have been like, oh no, instant bottom track here, because I can't condone going after little girls. Like, if you're making fun of the church, as sacrilegious as that sounds, the church at the time, okay, I guess I'll give it a pass. But yeah, it's a fun track, man. I like their take on it. So yeah, without any further ado, are you ready to close off side A here with the big one? The one that shall light my fire.
Yes, light my fire. ending side A, and I don't think I've ever done this on an episode of Hey Listen to This before. I'm going to do it right now, which may be a little bit of a spoiler, but I do not care. If you are listening to this podcast and you have not heard the song Light My Fire by The Doors, stop the tape. Stop the recording, hit pause, and go do it right now. Take 7 minutes out of your day while you're listening to this, hit pause, go listen to the song. And when you're done, come back right here where you left off. And the reason why I say that is this is a song that everyone should experience. Because to me, this song epitomizes the counterculture of the 1960s. And I'm not saying that because of the lyrics, which I think are great, but they are relatively simplistic, with Robbie Krieger writing the first verse and Jim Morrison writing the second verse about the time to hesitate is through, no time to wallow in the mire, try now we can only lose, and our love become a funeral pyre. That was Jim Morrison. The other part, which is, you know that would be untrue, you know that I would be a liar if I were to say to you, girl, we couldn't get much higher, come on baby, light my fire, that's Robbie Krieger. And the lyrics are good. The lyrics are very good. But the performances are downright amazing. First of all, you get Ray Manzarek doing that Bach-inspired motif at the beginning, which, again, hearkening back to classic albums, when they interviewed him, he said he just pulled that out of the annals of his mind, and it was just like, okay, this works. And it becomes one of the most iconic openings in the history of rock music. And then you get the vocals, which are doing their own thing. And Jim running the gamut from the smoothness of the first couple verses and choruses to the end, where he builds the intensities, particularly on that final verse and that final chorus, where he's, building and building, and then he gets that final shout of, try to set the night on fire. That is a perfect finish to a song. And then you get the rest of it, which is Ray Manzarek's organ work. The solo itself is just phenomenal. And Robbie Krieger, too, is just doing magic on the guitar on his solo. All of it very jazz influenced, and all of it very much trained in classical training, as you mentioned at the top, Ryan. Like, you can hear the musicianship in those three really driving things throughout this song. And John Densmore, too, I think he's the underrated hero of this track, because he very much is drumming in a jazz way, where he's keeping the tempo, but where he sees fit, he's throwing in fills, random cymbal hits, and fills that make it feel like something's about to happen, but it comes back, very much in the same vein as jazz. So he is putting on an absolute masterclass performance. And the one little thing about this song that I do like that nobody ever talks about is how you get Densmore doing this sort of samba ride on the verses before doing a open hi-hat beat on the choruses. And then you get that final verse where instead of it being the ride and the samba beat, to match the intensity, he closes the hi-hat and does a very typical 4/4 beat. And when you hear that, you notice the intensity lifting up on that final verse along with Morrison's vocals. I've always considered that to be one of the more underrated parts of this whole song. And not only is this song great, it is iconic for what it did realistically to just the idea of listening to music in the 1960s, because this was one of the first songs, if not the first big song, because it went to number one, where there was a single version and then there was an album version. So people listening on the radio would hear the first two verses, the first two choruses, a little bit of Ray's solo, then the end of Robbie's solo, then back to Morrison's vocals. So they attribute this mostly as a Morrison showcase. That's not what this song is, though, on the album. On the album, it is a long, just piece of wonderful rock that showcases every part of this band at its absolute peak. So the fact that there were the two versions of it really just changed the way people talk about albums and singles in general, and how many record executives would produce singles and album tracks based on what they heard. So this track is not only great, it is revolutionary in the history of pop culture and music. All that to say what I don't think needs to be said, but I'm going to say it anyway. We have arrived at the mountaintop for me. Light My Fire, it easy number one off the Doors.
All right, so this is going to be awkward.
It better not be. I will drive the 40 minutes and throw you out a window.
Well, good luck with that, man. I don't think my... Well, actually, I think the window behind me can break. I digress. So, so, yeah, no, like, this song's great. For a lot of the reasons that you mentioned, like, the instrumental performances are phenomenal. Like, they are what really carry the song to a T. Like, the Ray Manzarek, like that lick that you described at the beginning, like, it's iconic, and I just love how everything just, builds off of that. Love what Bobby Krieger is doing here. Some of the work that you highlighted there, it's really, really solid. And John Densmore, like you said, throughout this whole track here, he's doing a phenomenal job. And it's in the little moments that you picked up there that really just define how great this song is. And the one section I do want to highlight within the solo section is I just love the one section in the solo where things just kind of break down in a triplet pattern, because that's just so pleasant to the ears. And then for that to transition into that Bobby Krieger guitar solo section, and that's not nearly as intense, but still does bring the musical flair, is just as impactful. And taking a second to talk about the lyrics here, we get a song that's basically a double entendre, in that you can either take this as hey, hey babe, light my fire, man, we're in love, we're gonna take this night, we're gonna set it on fire. Or you can take it for the more practical reason, what the actual real reason is: drugs. So, and for those of you who are not aware about the backstory about Light My Fire, and not the backstory and how the song came to be, but one of the more controversial moments that stemmed from the song here specifically is, so back when this song was really popping off, the group was invited to play Ed Sullivan. And, the producers back in the day, they were like, oh, hey, Ed, we feel very, very unsure. We're very anxious about the phrase, girl, we couldn't get much higher. Can we change it to girl, we couldn't get much better? So, the host of the show, Ed Sullivan, talked to the Doors and said, hey, this is what's going on. Are you able to change it? And the Doors yada yada at him, saying, yeah, you know what, yeah, we'll do it. They even, changed it in the rehearsal. And then, they changed it to, the suggested lyric, right? Well, ladies and gentlemen, that's not where the story ends. The story ends with the actual performance, and Jim and the crew basically stick a metaphorical middle finger into society at the time on national TV, and sing the original line, which was, girl, we couldn't get much higher. And it caused quite a stir. I mean, after the performance, when the band walked off, Ed Sullivan did not acknowledge the group, and he was needless to say, a little bit upset. So that's a fun story about what the group was up to back in the day. Outside of those moments there, like I kind of alluded to, the lyrics though, they have what I like to call to be the Weekend effect, where they repeat pretty much throughout the whole song. You get some variation here or there, but the repetition of the lyrics doesn't really diminish the song's worth at any means. Because the rest of the instrumentation's doing the heavy lifting. The performances from Jim Morrison his performance is just solid enough in its own right that I don't care what he's actually saying. I mean, I might care to a certain degree, but within the context here, like, it's fine, it's great. I absolutely do appreciate this song. The awkward part about this, though, that I kind of hinted at is, unfortunately, Light My Fire did not light my fire enough, so it is not in my top 3.
Wow. I respect that. I mean, there are other songs that I can understand it being, and like you said, you had more of a connection with the Crystal Ship than you would with this, which is completely and utterly fine. But for me, again, this is the song that made the Doors who they are and really just sort of permanized them in culture. And by the way, I thank you for bringing up that Ed Sullivan story, because bands and artists feuding with Ed Sullivan is one of the more fun trips any rock and roll nerd could take while researching anything. Whether it's Buddy Holly performing without an amp one time because Ed Sullivan wouldn't let him perform a certain song, or the Rolling Stones being forced to change the lyrics of Let's Spend the Night Together, and Mick Jagger forcibly rolling his eyes every time he had to make that change. Yeah, fun stuff in regards to the People v. Ed Sullivan. But yeah, I'm also glad you mentioned the triplet part, because I talked about how the single version of the song differed from the album version. The single version, the triplet part is what is basically the solo section before it gets back into the singing. But you hear it a second time, well, technically the first time, on the solos towards the end of Ray Manzarek's solo. And the fact that people would hear that after hearing on the single version is just that nice little sort of callback to the future, if you will, compared to what they heard on the single version. So I thought that was really cool. Again, for me, this is just an absolute pinnacle of rock and the Doors sound for me. So yeah, Light My Fire is numero uno for me.
And like, I'm not ignorant of the fact that Light My Fire is like one of the best songs that the Doors has they've ever produced, and it's one of the most iconic tracks whatsoever to come out of the 60s in the classic rock era. But for me, I'm coming at this review, I mean, it might be redundant, but from more of a personal angle. So that's why I chose the Crystal Ship to at least be in my top 3. And ladies and gentlemen, what does that mean? That's going to be my what's going to be my favorite track? I guess we'll wait until the end to find out. But anyways, oh man, spoilers and puns abound, man. But before we go into the back half of the record and find out what is a backdoor man, and will he light my fire, Matthew, I have a question for you.
And what is that question, Mr. Jamal F. Kearns?
If the listener is just really appreciating what we are bringing here to the table for this here review, they're appreciating the fire that we are delivering to their ears right now in a pleasurable sense, and they want to help continue to support what we do on a week in, week out basis. What are some ways that they can help support what we do and help us keep on keeping on, man?
Well, the easiest way for them to support us is by keeping on themselves, by listening to our past episodes and any future episodes that come by. We are approaching the 100 album review mark for us, and we are well past the 100 episode mark because we've done discography drafts and other dives into personal experience. For example, our intro to K-pop episode that we did with your wife. And we have a lot of musical repertoire in our back catalog, whether it's jazz, K-pop, rock, hip-hop, R&B, pop, you name it, we got it. Country's in there too. So take a look through our library, see what you like, whether it's through podcast platforms like Apple Music, Spotify, Pocket Cast, or whether you have a YouTube subscription or YouTube account and you want to subscribe to us. We appreciate that. We post our episodes on there every week as well. And if you are on any of these platforms, do what it takes to, as Ryan would say, please the algorithmic wizards that be, and give us a like, comment, subscribe, give a 5-star rating if you like what you hear, and share with a friend, because we are on social media as well. Obviously, you don't have to share it on social media if you do not have it, but, if you have a phone or any type of technology, you can text them the link. We appreciate that too. But if you are on social media, we are as well, particularly on Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky, and Threads. So that is where to find us. The username is ttheylisten. Again, that is ttheylisten. And speaking of that username, if you want to reach out to us directly, but you do not know us directly, you can email us at ttheylisten@gmail.com. That is ttheylisten@gmail.com. Whether you want to give us some compliments, give us some critiques, or perhaps suggest an album that we could review in the future. We have done album requests before, and we are very much willing to do them again. So reach out to us if you want to be a part of this thing that we're doing. And to those of you who have already joined us on this crystal ship, as it were, thank you, because me and Ryan are doing this, just as two guys with microphones and a love of music. We're not people who are, sponsored by any major brands out there or any major corporations. We're just two dudes who are talking about music, and we love doing it, and we love that you're with us for the ride. So thank you from the bottom of our hearts that you continue to join us each and every week.
And thank you, man, for being such a good, excellent co-host to bounce stuff off of. Like, we definitely come from each a very passionate background about music. And I think we counteract each other pretty well. So thank you for taking this journey with me. And I'm excited to see, I know you alluded to the fact that we're approaching upon review 100. I'm curious to see I'm excited to see what the next 100 reviews after that are gonna have us dive into. Maybe we'll dive into some polka death metal at some point, but that's another journey for another day. But the journey that we are taking on for this day here specifically revolves some Doors and their debut album from 1967, and we're diving into the back half of that record with Backdoor Man. And I'm going to go ahead and kick this track off here. So this is the other cover that you alluded to earlier in the review here. So it's a cover of a blues legend song. Specifically, that blues legend is Howling Wolf, and that the song itself was co-written by Willie Dixon. So yeah, with that being in mind, it does give a lot of good context with how the song comes across, and how it comes across is just a pretty good blues song. It's a really good performance. I just love how everything kind of just starts out. There's not a whole lot of context here. I mean, you can dive into maybe some of the lyrics, maybe this could be a song about oh hey, I'm your backdoor man. This is how you're gonna get some drugs, or this is how you're gonna get some forbidden stuff. But I just take this as a good time kind of song, and if I'm not mistaken, I do believe that the Doors would often open up their live performances with this song here specifically, and I can envision that going over pretty well. It's a good warm-up song for them. Diving into more specifics though, Ray Manzarek and the lick that he's doing throughout different acts of this song here, that one lick specifically, it acts as an effective grounding point throughout the whole track. So I thought that was incredibly unique, and I did like what was going on there. The guitar solo section is pretty solid. I like what was going on with Bobby Krieger. And yeah, the only other thing I got to mention about the track here specifically, Jim sounds pretty great here. I love how he's getting into that energy, and he's getting screamy and shouty, and I like what he's bringing to the table. If I had to be honest with you, if I had to label any track as an album track, this would probably be it in terms of it's a good song. It's definitely going to go into the good song bucket. And I'm just more here for the vibes as opposed to the actual substance, if that makes any sense.
It does make sense, although I don't necessarily agree. I mean, this would not be my album track to end all album tracks on this album. I think it's a little better than that, but I'll just come out and say it. It's not better enough that it's in my top 3. But a lot of what you said is pretty much right there as far as my thoughts. Jim is the dominant force on this track. The band does sound good, particularly Densmore and Manzarek, just keeping things anchored down, with a little bit of jazziness from Densmore from time to time, particularly on the drum fills. Krieger, too, is just sort of following along until that solo, which does sound good. But Jim, with those little yelps at the beginning where he's just like getting into character, this has a feeling of a very live and raw cut on the album. Like they decided, hey, we're not going to, fancy this up or add any echoes or double tracks. We're just going to play this as it's a solid bluesy track. And lyrically speaking, that's exactly what it is. It's a bluesy track, which I know Jim Morrison was about poetry and deep meanings and esoteric lyrics. That's not this song. Blues music, for the most part, especially like peak era blues music of like the 20s, 30s, and 40s, if there was any meaning to it or any metaphorical meaning, it was pretty base. Like, it could very much be a baseline metaphor about sex, or a baseline metaphor about death, or a baseline metaphor about being broke. They would use metaphors, but not to an extent where it's just like, ooh, it's mysterious. What was he talking about? If you know, you know. And on this track, you know. Especially whenever Jim is talking about, you men eat your dinner, eat your pork and beans. I eat more chicken than any man's ever seen. Again, take a wild guess what that's about. So, yeah, he is basically trying to portray his bluesy backdoor man as well as he can. On stage, they would improvise a little bit more with this track, particularly in that middle section before the pork and beans chicken line. And it would just sort of become its own like little musical theater thing, similar to some other songs on this album. But yeah, Backdoor Man is a simple, solid, good album track. Not an album track, but a good song album track. It goes in the good song bucket as well. It's a great way to kick off the second side of the record.
I mean, maybe Jim really just wanted to talk about eating chicken. Like, maybe he's really maybe he's just a huge chicken kind of guy. I don't know. I mean, you might be reading too much into the track, man. Maybe it's just as simple as that.
I mean, to be fair, I mean, you're wrong, but to be fair, that would be the first time on this record that he's talked about soul food. So, I mean, you do have a point.
So, yeah, man. So, with all that being said, are you ready to shuffle on over to the next track, which is I Looked at You?
Yes. Well played. So, I Looked at You is the second of what I would consider 3 deliberate attempts at the Doors attempting traditional 60s pop, which I know sounds a little ironic, but trust me on this one. And it does sound really good, too, because you get that opening, very simplistic beat by John Densmore before Ray plays a little organ motif on top of it, complemented very well by Robbie Krieger's guitar. And Morrison himself sings very well on this track, too. It's not a very deep song at all, with, the lyrics are very simple. I looked at you, you looked at me, I talked with you, you talked with me, and we're on our way. I mean, it's pretty much just a simplistic, hey, we met, we like each other, cool. The only real deep, sort of mysterious lyric is at the end of the chorus, where Morrison sings, because it's too late, too late, too late, too late, too late. And one thing about this song, though, I know it sounds like traditional pop, and I said that, but the structure of it isn't very traditional, because it seems to go, verse, chorus, chorus again, solo section, verse, chorus, chorus, which is not traditional in the slightest. It feels traditional because it's sort of lighter than something like Light My Fire or Backdoor Man or some of the tracks coming up. But the upbeat is undercut by those lyrics at the end. And Ray, I think, is the driving force in this song. His organ solo is very, very good here. This is close to an album track, but not the album track for me on this album. It goes in the good song bucket as well because it's just very, very solid.
I agree with you, man. The one thing that really, again, this is gonna come across as Ryan Kearns coded, but like I am what I am. I am comfortable in my own skin. But the thing that I'm going to allude to is just the fake out ending was pretty great. But like even outside of like that fake out ending specifically, there's just several moments where like you could get like kind of a stop start kind of thing, and I'm all about that, man. Like especially like that fake out ending that I described. Oh my goodness! I was just like, yeah, I see you. I see you winking at the camera, and I like it, man. I'm looking at you. But for the song itself, like you said, it's a pretty good song. Raymond Zarek does do a good job, like you alluded to, really just leading the track. It's an overall though, like it's a pretty cool track that sounds pretty tight. And like I know that there's some allusions, and some people have like speculated about like how this song is basically about Jim's experience and the speed of life with like psychedelics, and how he takes trips forward to a place where he can't turn back. That might be stretching it a little bit. I mean, that could have been the original intention, but I don't know. I think you're just like you're you're diving it. You're making a mountain out of a molehill. Like it's a fun track. I do like what it's bringing to the table. Like I really don't have much else to say about it. I mean, it's just a fun track, man. Obviously not my top track off the whole album because otherwise I would have maybe gushed about it a little bit more. But I'm a fan of. I Looked at You.
Yeah, I'm a fan of it too. It's very much. See, what's interesting about this whole album is that it does have its big songs, but the songs that aren't as big, like you could listen to it and be like, you know what, that's really good. I like this song quite a bit. And there's a lot of that on this album. And we've talked about it with End of the Night. We've talked about it. Well, we haven't talked about it with End of the Night. We're getting there. But we've talked about it with I Looked at You. We've talked about it with 20th Century Fox, Soul Kitchen, even Backdoor Man. Like all of these tracks in and of themselves are really, really good. And it's basically a dogfight on this album for supremacy to the listener's ears, which is always a good sign. Speaking of that, we are heading to track 9 off the doors, which is End of the Night. Not the end of the record, but End of the Night. Ryan, I throw it to you.
So, End of the Night, it's very much in the, I don't want to say the same vein, but like I would say like the same like zip code of the Crystal Ship in terms of the sonic palette, where it's just so smooth. Like I love how smooth this track is. It's very lush, it's very syrupy, and I'm here for it. Like especially with how you get Jim just lingering on phrases. Like it's not a very cleanly sung song, but I just love just the emotion and just how pleasant it sounds. And like outside of like just how pleasant it sounds and how Jim's lingering on phrases, like the instrumentation works so well with how spacious everything is. Like outside of the big chorus moments, like in the verses, like you get this open kind of like nighttime kind of feel with Robert Krieger doing little licks here, and there's like splashes of instrumentation there. Like I do like what's going on there, and just other things I want to note is that like the ending where things just heighten in emotion. I'm here for that. Like one thing I do like about this song and this group as a whole is this is way this is like at least 20 something years before Nirvana broke through with like Nevermind and introduced the world to like loud soft dynamics. Like here, the group is really executing that to a T. Yeah, the only thing I gotta mention about End of the Night here is like it's just a solid song. I love how lush everything sounds. And maybe in an alternative universe, Crystal's ship could have been swapped out with End of the Night with just how lush everything sounds. But here we are, man. End of the Night is not my favorite song off the whole record. It goes in the good song bucket.
Yeah, it's an entry for myself as well in the good song bucket, because a lot of stuff you mentioned too, like the call and response that Ray Manzarek and Robbie Krieger are doing at the start of the track is great, where you have Manzarek going up the scale with his organ and Krieger doing these elegant dive bombs of sound where he's just going it's very dark and very brooding because like you said, it is a lush track, but it's very dark in timbre, as far as it's sounding like it's at the end of the night, like you're walking through a forest or you're walking through a dark alley with no direction, and you're looking for realms of bliss and realms of light. And the poetic lyrics from Morrison here are just really, really good, and how they are derived from poetry and how they have this feeling of mystery that cooperates with the music and the music cooperates with the lyrics. It's a really, really good, solid album track. I do like how the ending lifts up from the solo section, and the solo section is very nice and pleasant, very soft in its execution, but not so soft that it just dissolves. It's very well executed, and then you get that final chorus of Morrison singing very, very passionately. And much like Break On Through, it doesn't overstay its welcome. It is very much in the typical pop vein. It just has that, again, darkness in both music and lyric here. So yeah, End of the Night is a really good track. It goes very easily in the good/great song bucket, which is probably one of the heaviest I've ever had on the show, and for good reason.
Yeah, and I think I'm gonna pluck End of the Night out of the good song bucket for me and put it into the great song bucket alongside songs like I would put it in the same bucket as I would put Alabama Song. It would almost seem sacrilege to put Light My Fire in like the same bucket as Alabama Song and End of the Night. So like I would put Light My Fire in the great to like amazing song bucket. If for those of you who are like super nerds out there just trying to find out what buckets we're putting these songs in. So yeah, so are you ready to rescue me from my vamping here about buckets and try to figure out how to take it as it comes with the next track here, the penultimate track off the record?
Yes, the penultimate track off of The Doors, Take It As It Comes. This is the third of what I would consider the intentional pop songs on this record. And to me, I'm just going to come out and say it. This is the album track for me off this album. It's not bad at any means, but it's definitely the most ordinary, I would say. Because this feels, compared to End of the Night, it's relatively not as deep. Lyrically, it doesn't quite seem as deep either, although Morrison is trying to make it sound deep with those opening lyrics of time to live, time to die. It almost feels like a Los Angeles version of Turn, Turn, Turn by the Byrds, which is ironic because the Byrds were also from Los Angeles, but ignore that part. Yeah, like, Take It As It Comes, it's performed very nicely. I do like the organ solo that Ray provides. I do like the little drop back that it does before the final verse where you get just bass and drums. I do like that. And I do appreciate the irony for a song in which the end of the chorus goes, "You're moving much too fast," is in and of itself doing that because it's a very fast track. It's one of those tracks, like, we talk about Break On Through and End of the Night not overstaying their welcome and getting out of the way. This feels like it's pushing everyone out of the way to be done. Like, all right, this is a track. Hi, here we are. This is what we have to say. Anyway, bye. And it's just like, what did I just listen to? But what I just listened to in that regard is not very bad at all. It's a competently performed song. There's nothing wrong with it. Their lyrics are fine. The music performances are good. But among all these tracks, it did not stand out compared to the other 10. So, not my least favorite track, because it doesn't deserve that, but definitely the album track on the album for me.
Fair enough, man. And like, I think the one thing that I gravitate towards, like, ironically enough, I know that you were kind of jabbing at like the irony of the whole, like, oh hey, you're going way too fast, and it's a pretty much fast track. I liked the intensity and like how quickly this song rips. So like, I think that was the main drive thing for me. Like, and like the way that I'm gonna, like, dive in a little bit further into detail about my appreciation about the track through that lens, is that in the verses you get the impending sense that, like, something big is gonna happen. Like, I don't say it's like an anxious kind of feeling, but with how the song is structured, with how just the emotions are laid out from Jim's vocals, like in the verses you get like, in the first verse, time to live, time to lie, time to laugh, time to die, and then, like, you get that pop with the chorus, and like, it's very, very effective. I like it very much. So it might be. I think, well, I don't know. Like, I was gonna say that this is one of the most punk rock songs off the whole record, but I mean, I would argue that "Break On Through to the Other Side" is a little bit more punk rock than this. This is a pretty much a straightforward rock music at the time. So yeah, I don't really have much else to say about "Take It As It Comes," which might allude to the fact that this might be actually my album track to label this as like the album-iest track of them all off this record. But yeah, I did appreciate what it was bringing to the table. Yeah, it's fine, man. One thing that you said earlier on in the review, I want to bring up. This whole review and this whole, like, the way that this album has been laid out, it kind of reminds me of when we dove into The Killers' breakthrough album, Hot Fuss. Like, you get the big songs off of there, and like the deeper cuts and songs that weren't like the big ones, like, they're good in their own right. But you are really playing with some big dogs off this record to, like, compete for, like, the top spots here.
You are. It's very much a dogfight between this and these two are, well, not these two. This song, "Take It As It Comes," is very much not a dog meant to win a fight, which in a sense is a good thing because dogfighting is not good. Do not do it if you are listening. But that being said, I think we've beat around the bush a little too much here. I am ready if you are, and I know you are, because anyone checking their scorecard should be realizing what's about to come next, is that we have reached the end of the Doors and the end of the track list with the end. Ryan, the floor is yours.
Why, thank you, Matt. This is the end of the review. Anyways, so, no, with the end here, I think with this song here, taking off my glasses for those of you who are not subscribed to our dark Patreon feed here, like, for me, the reason why the end is just such a special song for me, considering what was going on at the time, late 60s, like, you get the Beatles, you get all that flower power, hippie, poppy stuff that we've kind of dove into, not specifically with the Beatles, but like we've dove into some 60s stuff. And for those of you who have a foundational, like, classic rock education at the time, like, you will understand, like, what the main sound was. With the end here, this is basically, I don't want to say taking a torpedo to the whole musical landscape at the time, but it is just something that kind of comes out of left field. And it was the first song for me that really showed me what the Doors can truly do to separate themselves from their contemporaries at the time. And expanding upon that a little bit more is the fact that here, like, you get the repetition of the phrase "this is the end" that's used throughout the whole song. But unless I'm mistaken, I mean, there's not really a chorus here other than "this is the end, beautiful friend," but that's only used like maybe like twice, if I'm not mistaken. I just did a breeze through on Genius.com to verify my claim, and I think I am correct. But the rest of the song, on a lyrical standpoint, it is legitimately poetry in motion. And while like a lot of the like bits here were kind of like Frankenstein together in terms of on a lyrical sense, like I feel like they work well. And like the one section I do want to highlight though and dive into, which is probably one of the more you know notable iconic moments in the song, is in verse 5, where it begins with "the killer awoke before dawn. He put his boots on." And like I'm not gonna read the rest of the verse. Essentially, that killer goes down the hall, goes to his house, sees his different family members, goes into his parents' bedroom, and basically says that he wants to kill his father, and he wants to with his mother. Like it's like not specifically alluded to, but it's basically alluded to. Like, in the bridge right after that, you get Morrison basically just saying fuck, 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 like, a bajillion times. So, yeah. And the whole concept of, like, killing a father, marrying the mother, like, there's that whole Freudian, philosophy of, like, we all want to kill our fathers, marry our mothers. But one thing that I did find entertaining, though, is that according to John Densmore, the whole concept of killing the father and, like, making love to the mother, it's a metaphor for spiritual enlightenment, which, breaking down into two parts, the act of killing the father is meaning to destroy all those things within yourself that are not of yourself, the alien concepts which are not yours, like they must die, like what parts of you are truly not you. And like the making love to the mother is like fostering like what you see as good in yourself, and like what is truly you. So yeah, I did appreciate that dive into that aspect there, because like, yeah, you can simply have the mindset of it being like a Freudian thing, but I like the spiritual enlightenment metaphor that John Densmore alluded to there. Like outside of the lyrical aspects though, like, yes, Morrison sounds great. I love what he's doing here. It's a very captivating performance. And especially towards the bridge section where he drops the F-bomb like a bajillion times, like he's really just riding the energy of that performance high so captivatingly well. So yeah, that's on the lyrical and vocal end. Like absolutely fantastic, iconic stuff. On the instrumental end, I love what's being brought here. Like Bobby Krieger does do a really great job here utilizing his guitar to create like a desert feel, using like almost like a satire, not like kind of like a desert kind of instrument kind of like feel. I do like what's going on there, and I do like how John Densmore is doing a great job counteracting the guitar, and like it's almost coming off as like I don't want to say a free form, but it's definitely a more open kind of beat that he's laying on the track, and it's acting as a grounding point, but it's a free form kind of point. So like it's a very interesting thing, and like that whole dynamic is used very effectively throughout the song. I mean, the only other thing that I just got to say about the song, again, like that the way that bridge is executed. I know I alluded to the fact that Jim drops a bajillion F-bombs in that bridge and he really gets into the performance, but the backing band behind that performance is just it. They execute the elevation and the heightened intention of emotion so well that I absolutely love that section there, and just how the whole track ends off with everything just kind of winding down and it almost seems like a deflation kind of moment. Yeah, it's just so good, man. I can go on and on and on and talk. Probably do another 2-hour episode here specifically about the end, but for the sake of not vamping on for ad nauseum here, the only thing I gotta say, just to officially vocalize it 100%, the end does complete my top 3, and it is easily my favorite track off the record here.
And for those keeping score on your Hey Listen to This scorecards, you will realize that this also completes my top 3. I have this in at number 3. Ryan, I have a question for you. Have you ever had a day, because you mentioned how the whole vibe of the 60s was, the summer of love and getting in touch with nature and just sort of being outside on a summer's day and appreciating everything that is. So I would take it you've had some days where you've been outside on a summer's day, right?
Yeah.
So have you ever had that moment on certain days where you've been with your friends all day and it's hot outside and you're sweating, and all of a sudden it gets near nighttime, it's 9 o'clock at night, you're sweating, you smell like garbage, and you just want to go home, and you're in that sunset haze and you can't really do anything at that moment, and you're just sort of not in the greatest state of all?
Yeah. I'm very familiar with that feeling.
Okay. I just wanted to describe that because that's what this song sounds like, and I mean that as a compliment. This song sounds like the exhaustion of a summer day, the exhaustion of living in a summery system. And it's especially shown through in Robbie's guitar work, where, like you said, it sounds like a sitar, like they're in the middle of the India tar pits, and you're just wandering through the desert, like you're naturally high, or maybe not naturally high. Again, it's Jim Morrison, it's the Doors. You take a guess. But even with that, you mentioned John Densmore's drumming, which is really, really good. I know you mentioned it's freeform. I would say it's more or less just jazz. He's just taking a Latin beat and just sort of putting splashes in wherever he sees fit. Ray Manzarek does a very good job on this too. He's not as pronounced as the other 3, but he does a very good job in of itself. And Jim Morrison, I mean, come on. This is his, this is his still life. This is his War and Peace. This is his absolute artistic vision wrapped up in this song, with the poetry, the freeform poetry that describes the dark side of LA, the dark side of human experience, the Oedipus complex that you mentioned, where kill the father, love the mother, and as John Densmore called it, basically an evaluation on the matrimony of sex and death. And I'm not going to add too much more than what you already did, because you did a really good job, but I have to agree with you that the accelerando that takes place at the end of the bridge before the final choruses is just executed so well. Because coming up, the majority of the time I listen to this album, I listen to the censored version, which doesn't have the plethora of F-bombs that you mentioned. And to me, I don't necessarily think the F-bombs are enhancing it. I mean, they do in a sense, but even without them, the performance of Krieger and Densmore particularly is just so intense. And the way that Krieger particularly does that, right before the final wailing of drums from Densmore and Morrison saying kill before the final chorus, it's just mwah, it is so good. I can in good conscience put this above Break On Through or Light My Fire, but it deserves its place in rock history as just one of the first real like pieces of dread music that showcases a dark side of anything, and that's why it's in my top 3. It is a historic, great, very deep, very chaotic, very everything the Doors stands for piece of music.
I'm very glad that while we might not share the specific placement in terms of how much we appreciate the end in this album review here, I do appreciate we both identified it as being one of the best tracks off the LP, and yeah, I mean it's for a very good reason that we both alluded to. And just to complete like my mini saga that I've been doing here, this is another song that I would show like a novice Doors like curious like listener, be like, okay, now that I broke on through to the other side and I got on that crystal ship, where should I go next? I would be like, check out the end. If you are still a fan, you are free. You can do whatever you want. You can go down any rabbit hole you choose, man.
Yeah, no, it is it is definitely a experience in music form for sure. But we have come to the end of the end, which means we've come to the end of the Doors. 11 tracks up, 11 tracks down, scorecards filled out, and 3 words left to say, Ryan.
We did it.
We did it, man. We took a trip back to 1967. No, not that kind of trip. Clean your mind. And we talked about the debut album by The Doors, featuring the vocal work of Jim Morrison, the drumming of John Densmore, the organ work of Ray Manzarek, the guitar of Robbie Krieger, and occasionally the bass of Larry Knechtel, all in their top form. And Ryan, this was your pick, so I'm going to let you go first.
So it was an absolute pleasure, diving back into this record, and I am gonna check. I'm gonna go back into the Doors' discography and check out other, revisit other albums within their catalog, because I owe it to myself. 2025 has been a year. I mean, just go on to social media for 5 minutes, scroll down 3 feet, and you're gonna find something that's gonna make you want to throw your phone out the window. But for me, experiencing this album again really brought back fond memories of diving into the Doors for the first time, and the group really brought unique things to this record here. I mean, yes, a lot of the I would say yes, we talked about a lot of the heavy hitters off of the record here, in terms of bigger, more well-known songs like Break On Through, The End, Light My Fire. I would consider those to be the big 3. I have a personal affinity for The Crystal Ship, and for the sickos out there who are like, oh, what about Alabama Song? Yes, it's there. Don't worry. I appreciate it too. And there's other moments here, the End of the Night, that I really did appreciate. And the other songs that I would consider to be in the good song bucket, there's several moments that I just appreciate what they're bringing to the table. Yeah, if the other songs didn't exist, maybe I would say, hey, maybe Soul Kitchen is my favorite song off the whole album. But the other songs exist for a reason, and I'm thankful for that. I cannot say enough good things about the Doors as a group, and how much I did appreciate them growing up, and how foundational they were for me in terms of my musical appreciation for one reason or another. That being said, I cannot give this album a perfect 10 out of 10, only for the fact that I think the only song that really truly broke my mind was The End. The rest of the songs are my review still stands as is. I do appreciate them for what they are. But I will give this I'll give this album not a 10 out of 10, but a 9 out of 10.
And my thoughts on the Doors, revisiting this album myself, it made me realize that, in all honesty, I would consider this a comfort album for me. Like, this is one of those albums where I can put it on, know exactly what's coming, and still enjoy it from start to finish. You talk about revolutionary songs, not just for music and pop in the 60s, but just culture itself. Whether it's Break On Through the Other Side introducing music videos, or Light My Fire basically being the dawn of FM radio, or songs like The End introducing a wicked, dark poetry that became more commonplace throughout the late 60s and early 70s and even goes on till this day. I mean, those are obviously the big three. And then you get to the dogfight that is the rest of the album, where you have great tracks like Soul Kitchen, End of the Night, Backdoor Man, Crystal Ship, 20th Century Fox, Alabama Song. I mean, pretty much any song aside from Take It As It Comes, I would say is at a dogfight to be in a good or great song bucket. And it is just an album that you could put on and appreciate from start to finish. And not only that, but even for what this album did for music, there's really not an album in pop culture, really rock music, quite like this album. Like, can you think of a band that really does sound a lot like The Doors? Like, we know, like, Greta Van Fleet sounds like Led Zeppelin, or the Oasis has spent their entire lives trying to sound like the Beatles. Who really sounds like The Doors and get away with it? Not many, if any. So that's what makes this album so revolutionary, and the songs on it are really good too. So, unlike you, I am willing to give this a beefy, unapologetic, no holds barred 10 out of 10.
Full respect, my friend. And like, maybe off, like, episode, I'll give my reasons why I didn't give this album a full 10 out of 10. But for the sake of good content, ladies and gentlemen, I gave this album a 9 out of 10. Matthew gave this a 10 out of 10 because he's bringing the beef here with this episode, this review here. So that makes the math pretty easy. On average, our score for this album by The Doors, entitled The Doors, is a solid 9.5 out of 10 because
Math
works for everyone. It does not discriminate, does not hate. It is just math. Deal with it. And speaking of dealing with it, my next album recommendation, I'm just gonna keep it pretty basic, pretty simple, and I'm just gonna say, just go to the next album in their discography. That being The Doors, and the album being Strange Days. It's an album that I would honestly consider to be their best album out of their whole catalog. And that might be why I didn't give this album here, the debut record here, the beefy 10 out of 10, because like I have a stronger affinity for the other two records in line here, those being Strange Days and Waiting for the Sun. But yeah, so Strange Days features People Are Strange, When the Music's Over, Love Me Two Times, and yeah, just a whole other plethora of songs that I gravitate towards more as a Doors fan, and just my own personal experience. But yeah, ladies and gentlemen, if you've experienced the debut album by The Doors and you're looking for where to go next, don't overthink it, just go to the next record.
I'll have to revisit Strange Days because I'm trying to think if and when was the last time I listened to that album in full. So I'll have to give that a listen. But for me, my selection is also going to be a Doors album, but it's not going to be a typical one because the Doors, after they broke up in the 70s following Jim Morrison's death, a lot of their live tapes and concert performances have been released to the public over the course of the succeeding 50 plus years, and that's what I'm going to choose for it. I'm going to bring it right back to our city of Pittsburgh, where the Doors performed in 1970s. So if you could find it, which is not easy, but if you could find it, The Doors live in Pittsburgh, May 1970. It's on CD. It was released on CD. I want to say roughly around 2008, 2009. It's a great performance by the band at the Civic Arena and features a lot of the songs on this album, particularly Break On Through, Light My Fire, and songs like that. But it also gives a more intricate view into what the Doors did live, which was a lot of improvisation, putting songs in other songs, and just sort of creating that general aura that they established with their first album. So, The Doors live in Pittsburgh, 1970. Check it out.
So, to summarize, ladies and gentlemen, our average rating was a 9.5 out of 10 for this record. I recommended Strange Days by The Doors in terms of the next album recommendation, and Matthew recommended an album out of their live catalog, which was, kudos to you for, pulling I don't say Uno reverse card, but just pulling, going off the beaten path a little bit. And that specific live recording that Matthew is recommending was from their live in Pittsburgh, 1970. So, make sure that you check out both of those records. I might try to see if I can dig into that live recording that you mentioned, because I'm always a fan of live recordings myself. So, yeah, man, we did it, man. What a review.
What a review. I'm so glad we got into this album because, like I said, it's always been one of my favorites, and I think it's one of the most unique and just well-established rock records of all time. Although, you mentioning that you have a stronger affinity for Strange Days, it does make me want to check out that record a little bit more, because to say that's better than this one is... Those are some words, but I will take it. I will take your words and walk with them and run with them as I please.
I mean, I might be wrong. It's been a while since I've listened to Strange Days myself, so I might have to revisit myself and then report back to you personally. But in the interest of pushing forward in terms of content here, we are finished talking about the Doors. And there's only one more piece of business before we put this review into unconsciousness. Matthew,
yes.
Where are we going? Where are we going next? Sorry to interrupt you.
That's okay. So, I preface what I'm about to say with this. As reviewers, we are entitled to our opinions, and I believe that if our opinions disagree with each other, that's not necessarily an attack on us personally. That is just a difference of opinion in music. So whenever we have disagreements, they are simply a matter of taste. They're not a matter of personal disagreement or personal character. And that is not something that either I or Ryan should apologize for. However, as a friend of mine, one of my best friends in the world, Ryan, I do feel kind of bad that you have given me 2 10 out of 10 albums in a row, and the last album I gifted you with was, for lack of spoilers, not a 10 out of 10. So, allow me to apologize in the form of our next review, which is going to be based out of 2 options that you are to choose from now. Are you ready?
Oh, man. You had my curiosity. Now you have my attention.
Yeah, I'm just gonna keep the options very simple. I'm gonna make you choose based on the year that the album was released, and your options are either 2008 or 2012.
Oh. I'm gonna hold back on the 2012 album because I have a strong suspicion on what that album could be. So, for the sake of my curiosity, I'm curious to see what you have in the year of our Lord 2008.
Was it really the year of whatever? But yeah, you have chosen 2008, and that means we'll be going back to the year 2008, or rather, we'll be going back to the year of 1959. For our next album will be the album The 59 Sound by the Gaslight Anthem.
Let's fucking go, man. All right, cool, man. I would like in terms of like anything that you could have chosen. Like again, I'm not that good with naming all the albums that came out within specific years, but for you to pull that in the year of 2008, like out of like kudos, man. I'm very much jazzed up, man.
I am too. I mean, it's been a minute since I've listened to the album in full, but I am ready to discuss it with you on our next episode. So it's gonna be fun. So if you have not listened to the 59th Sound by the Gaslight Anthem, you may do so before our next episode so that you can have your opinions, and then you can have opinions on our opinions when we drop the episode next time around. So Ryan, we are done with the Doors. The doors have closed, so to speak. Do you have any final words before we put this review to rest?
This is the end.